For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Monday practice of Utah week. And I said Monday, everything's moved up a day earlier because of that Friday game, but it's practice as normal. And Clay Helton was proud of how this team came out and practiced. He said that they had a great attitude today. But Dan, I know you are pretty particular when it comes to body language, and you had some observations in that area.
Yeah, I think one of the things I talked about from Saturday was I didn't like USC's body language at all. I liked what I saw from Brigham Young. They really wanted to be there. Couldn't wait to get out on the field, execute their game plan, do all the things that they had, fixed, decided to run against USC. Thought maybe they would catch USC. I didn't think USC ever looked like they were really in it. That they were, they were there and they were working at it, but not all that upbeat, and it kind of showed in the way the game was played. But then, at practice today, you got to give them credit, I guess. They're very upbeat, and they're really, positive. And Tim Drevno, for example, last week, it was a Tuesday practice, said how impressed he was with his offensive line, how good they were, how athletic they were. And I said, do you still feel that way? Absolutely, yes, no question about it. We did a pretty good job. I know Coach Baxter said numbers don't matter, but then Coach Drevno and Coach Helton basically said numbers do matter. So it's one of the, but they were very upbeat. Is that a good thing or a bad thing going into this week? I think a lot of it is how do they practice?
Yeah.
How they talk to us after practice, we'll see.
Yeah.
But how do they actually practice, I think is the key, getting ready for a team that's far more athletic in Utah than Brigham Young. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, you previewed a lot in there. Let's go first to Graham Harrell. We got to talk to him today. I mentioned on Saturday's instant analysis that we didn't get a chance to talk to him. I didn't mean to say that he declined to talk to us. We just didn't see him. So we were in Clay Helton's presser. So I know some people took that as he just didn't want to talk to us, but sometimes we just don't cross paths. But we did get to talk to him today. When asked in hindsight, would you change any of the play calls, he said no. He liked everything that he called. Pretty much he said it came down to execution, and he did confirm he called all of the plays. I know that's something that the boards had kind of started a conspiracy theory about, but he said it himself. Clay Helton said Graham Harrell called all the plays. But Dan, what do you take away from Graham's thinking about when it comes to dropping 8? They knew they were going to drop 8 and didn't really go the way they wanted to as far as play calling.
I think it was interesting because he said what happened on the first series where USC goes right down the field, long drive scores, boom, they're out in front. I said, did they change anything defensively after that? Nope, they ran the same exact stuff. They just ran it better from that point of the game. And USC didn't run their stuff, but it wasn't a case of we didn't know what they were going to do. They did throw in some wrinkles apparently, or act like they were going to do some things that they maybe didn't do. But basically, they were dropping 8, which would give you, give you the thought that might not be able to run this ball against those guys, and we're going to have to be able to run this ball. And I don't think anybody didn't think that was what was going to happen in this game. And the fact that BYU had given up like 6 yards a carry in their first 2 games made you think, well, we ought to be able to run it too if you're USC.
Yeah.
And they still will tell you they did a pretty good job running the ball, although an average of 3.8 yards a carry probably doesn't make it look like they really did a good job. And when they really had to run it in overtime, they had 3rd and 5 after 2 runs. So I understand they really want to be upbeat and really want to. And I thought, I love Graham's answer. Did you like the plays? If you had a chance to go back to the plays in overtime, for example, 2 runs and then the interception. Sure, I liked them all. That's why I called them. Yeah. I liked them. Now, I'm guessing that the different options available to Keaton, throwing the ball to a freshman who was short of the first down marker, who was surrounded, probably wasn't the first thing he wanted to have happen on that play.
Yeah.
But it was an option. It was a possibility, and apparently Keaton just kind of focused on the short man, and he was short. It wouldn't have been a first down. And the only thing that you could not do in overtime for USC was turn the ball over. You didn't matter if you'd have run 3 plays for no gain, you still kicked the field goal.
Yeah.
So on that 3rd down, after you didn't want to throw it, do you give it to 2 freshmen, one to throw it, one to try to catch it? Or do you just say, you know what, they got us on this one, we'll kick the field goal. I mean, Chase McGrath's already kicked a 52-yarder, so you feel like we'll kick it. On the road, you normally don't want to play for a tie in overtime. But in this case, maybe you just say, okay, we'll come back and get them on the next series. But no second guessing at all. I mean, nobody. Clay, how many times did Clay say how much confidence he has in Graham? And somebody kind of said, why? And he said, well, have you ever talked to him? Man, you know, he just exudes confidence, and he does. He did today. It wasn't, and I don't know that Saturday he might have been mad about how things turned out, but I don't know that it was that he didn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
He certainly had no, hesitation to talk about how he called the plays.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Keaton and his reads, like you mentioned on that overtime interception, Keaton said today that after looking at the film and kind of looking back at what his performance, he said that sometimes he rushed his reads or he would throw the ball and kind of guess what the read would be. And that's something that Graham Harrell said he needs to work on, obviously, but just progressing those reads and not, he said sometimes on the film it showed that Keaton would not even look. He'd just turn his head really fast and he wouldn't see open guys. And so in that sense, the play calling worked, but Keaton just didn't see the open receiver or whatnot. But what do you take away from the freshman mistakes are going to come with Keaton. What do you expect going forward with him?
I don't know. I mean, we saw some of that performance in the 2 Coliseum scrimmages where he looked like an 18-year-old freshman. The Stanford game is so out there, so bizarrely one of a kind. All I could do after the Stanford game is say, I saw it. Who knows? He could have been 30 of 33 if the 2 passes hit guys in the hand or caught. And that's impossible. And, so what he did in that Stanford game, I don't know. He might not replicate that in his whole college career. I mean,
you can't say that. You don't know.
Well, he could have had a 30 of 33 day. Nobody does that. That's almost impossible. It really is almost impossible. I don't care who you're playing against. So that was so spectacularly great performance that maybe you start thinking, I've got this figured out. And, they had the example of JT, who had, on that interception he got, in game 1, where he kind of predetermined, I'm going to throw it through those guys, and he got intercepted at the goal line. And what you have to hope is, and what Keaton said was, you learn from these mistakes. Yeah. This is what you do. You learn from them. We did hear Graham say that he did want to take some pressure off him, especially after the second interception. There was no question about that they were just going to run the ball. And that's probably a tough way to go on the road against a real competitive team that's coming at you if you're trying to kind of baby your quarterback a little bit. And that's probably a really hard way to go. And that's what made it didn't look like the air raid.
Yeah. Because
the air raid, you don't baby the quarterback. You just say, go for it, go get it. And that's not what they were doing. So, I can understand Graham trying to protect Keaton. And you don't want him to throw that third interception, as we saw. Yeah. It's like what happens if you got a pitcher out there and he's getting shelled. You just kind of, in baseball, you just take him out. Yeah. But in the relief pitcher, so they wanted to try to get through as best they could, and it didn't quite work.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. You kind of said babying him in a bad tone, but if you have a guy in an air raid who can't make the right reads, what else are you supposed to do in that situation?
Well, especially when they're dropping 8.
Yeah.
You have to read. When they're dropping 8, you better look everywhere because, you got a lot of clutter.
Yeah.
And you have to hope you got 5 guys at least blocking 3. That ought to be okay.
Yeah.
You ought to be. And, again, we saw Keaton sort of glide in the Stanford game with his eyes downfield. We didn't see much of that at BYU. He didn't look. He basically kind of set up and was a little stationary and didn't give himself that chance to put a little pressure on, say, the linebacker, where he's got to decide as Keaton's rolling and moving toward the line of scrimmage a bit, do I come up? And if he comes up, does that give you a look at a receiver? That we didn't see much of that. We didn't see much of that at all.
Well, also BYU was able to get a lot of pressure with just sending 3 guys, and maybe Keaton didn't have enough time, he felt, to make those reads just because he had to get the ball off fast. But Graham Harrell talked about that, how BYU played a physical game, they played a good game, and got that pressure with 3 guys. But I wanted to ask the question, it's always hard in Graham Harrell's scrums because everyone is just yelling questions at him, but the next opponents, their defensive fronts are going to be better than BYU. It's going to be an upgrade each game almost. How do you fix if everyone's dropping 8 and still getting pressure with 3? How do you fix that? What adjustments do you make with this offensive line?
Yeah, according to Clay, Utah's going to bring in 4 or 5 defensive guys that are going to play in the NFL up front. And so, okay, now how does this go? How does USC handle that? I mean, Brigham Young couldn't handle Utah's physicality. Utah was too quick, too strong.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, one of the things maybe you hope for is Utah watches that USC game and says, hey, BYU could do that to them. We're in pretty good shape. I don't know that that's going to happen with Utah because they've never won a game at the Coliseum. This is, they win this game, they're in pretty good shape in the South. I know Arizona State, I don't even know where they play, but this is the game they've been pointing for. They had 3 out-of-conference games, and this is their opening Pac-12 conference game, national TV. It's going to be kind of a big deal for Utah. There are a lot of people who don't get to see Utah. I mean, it won't kick off real late. It's 9 o'clock kickoff in the East. But it'll determine, they're up to 10th, but it'll determine kind of where they go. So one would think they don't come in flat saying USC couldn't handle BYU, they're not going to handle us.
Yeah.
I would guess that's not the case. They're going to play well. I think the answer is USC has to come out and play well.
Yeah.
They don't want to be talking about the other team playing well. You want to be talking about your team playing well.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, you got to talk to John Baxter about the punting performance of Ben Griffiths. I know during the game people were tweeting at me thinking that they were sold a different product than what they're seeing on the field. But as far as Baxter goes, he's been, and Clay Helton in his Sunday night conference call, they've all been defending Ben and say that he's been doing what they expect of him.
It's really weird. I mean, he's had 9 punts. Right now, after 3 games, he's, I guess, 1.6 yards short of where Reed Budrovich was last year. Reed was like 39.38 average, and Ben is like 37.78 or something like that. Last year, USC was, I believe, 111th or 112th in punting. This year, USC is 113th in punting. So, Baxter said he'd like to have 2 of those punts back. But other than that, he said, he kicked the 47-yarder the other day. He kicked it. It was in the air for 5 seconds. So he said we haven't had anybody do that since Tommy Malone, who led the nation for those Pete Carroll teams. But it isn't turning out the way they thought it was going to turn out with Ben. He hasn't flipped the field. He got 3 inside the 20 Saturday, but one was 15, I guess, 16, 15 or 16, and 2 to the 13. I mean, it wasn't like he was, putting them totally back in the hole. And I think one only went to the 48 or something. And so he thinks maybe Ben thinking too much or trying to figure, and just not hitting the ball other than hitting it really high. And it'd be interesting because I think Utah has another Australian punter, and I think he's doing really well. So it'll be a battle of the Australian rules punters, and we'll see how that goes. Hasn't been going USC's way though, because I think the BYU kid and that altitude, I think his average was like 48 something, as opposed to Ben's 37 something.
Yeah,
it's giving away, even if it's just 4 punts, that's giving away 44 yards.
Yeah. And as far as your Utah point, Utah usually has traditionally good special teams all around, so that'll be an interesting matchup battle to see on Friday. But as far as injuries go, Greg Johnson did not practice. Helton said that he got dinged on Saturday. He's going through concussion protocol right now. Andrew Voorhees was not dressed out, still dealing with that foot injury, but someone who did return was Christian Rector. He was in full pads. Clay Helton said he practiced today. We did see him do some individual reps in the 20 minutes that we were there for practice, and then it's the usual crew, but there was an unusual addition today. Brew Mccoy actually made his first practice appearance of the season. He was not dressed out in pads, but he did do some light warm-up stretching with the team, and then presumably went in and did rehabbing. Clay Helton said he did some running indoors, so that's a good development for Brew there. The fevers are gone, apparently, Clay Helton said. So a development there, but no status update on his NCAA waiver. Clay kept saying same status, so we'll assume that no answer there yet.
Yeah, I would think the Brew Mccoy back and forth with the NCAA. I think that would. I mean, there's no precedent, so there could be, back and forth and back and forth. And I mean, I don't think USC's even thinking about. We need to try to push this through. I think Brew, he got to do some individual. He would run down the end zone or the end line and then up the sideline, make that turn at the at the flag and. Working with the individual rehab guys, and we didn't see. I don't think I saw this, but Clay said he got to catch some passes, so he got to do some things. He looks good. I mean, he looks like he belongs out there.
Yeah.
But he's been a long time. So, but I think the number now, there were 13 on Rehab Island. That's the highest number of the year.
Yeah.
So it's inching up because, except for Christian, who was just on there. And it wasn't exactly a Rehab Island guy. The guys who've been on there almost all year, very few are coming off.
Yeah.
And you got more guys like Andrew Voorhees and Greg Johnson joining them. So we had a total of 13 there, and probably not the direction you want that to go.
Yeah, without a doubt. Alrighty, Dan, any final thoughts before we wrap it up here on a Monday practice?
Well, I hope there is upbeat Friday night, the coaches and the players as they were today. If they're as upbeat after this Utah game as they are before the game, USC fans will be happy.
Yep, that makes sense. Ending on a sassy note, I see there, Dan. But that's going to wrap it up for today's practice. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.